I I think it's worth it. Now, those of you who know will remember that when I was on a program called The Circle, one of my I was sharing the screen with a man called Richard Madeley, and we met shortly after the filming was over. And I thought, what an interesting man. I very much like Judy, and of course, in the program, he was pretending to be a young girl called Judy, and I can't remember whether I saw through that. I think I probably did, and he was very nasty to me about my cat. Something which I don't think I really I really dealt with, and I was very upset. I cried for a whole day, but Richard almost certainly was not told that. And the exchange that he had with between Richard Madeley and Rachel Reeves on Good Morning Britain is very interesting. I don't suppose she cried all day, but when Richard sets his mind to doing something, he does it. It was an interview that was initially supposed to focus on economic growth, the third runway in Heathrow Airport, infrastructure plans, and instead it turned into a forensic examination of Reeves' professional credentials, or perhaps her creative interpretation of them. And Richard Madeley, never one to shy away from a direct line of questioning, as I know, confronted Reeves with discrepancies in her work history. And the crux of the issue, Reeves had long claimed she worked at the Bank of England for a decade, and in reality, records now show her tenure was approximately 6 years, including a year spent at the London School of Economics. Additionally, while she had described her role at Halifax Bank of Scotland as that of an economist, reports suggest her position was more administrative and IT-based, far from the policy-heavy economic analysis role that she has implied. Reeves, in response to Richard's questioning, did not directly address these discrepancies. Instead, she doubled down on her overall career trajectory, emphasising her roles at the Bank of England, the British Embassy in Washington, and her academic credentials. She insisted that voters should judge her based on her performance as Chancellor rather than the particulars of her past employment. But as any seasoned political observer knows, it's rarely the establishment itself that lands one in, it's rarely the embellishment, the lie that lands oneself in trouble. It's the perception of evasion. And this is not merely, therefore, a case of a minor CV exaggeration. Reeves' credibility, her integrity as Chancellor is grounded in her economic expertise, and the hints of inflation, whether in figures or in personal experience, undermines public trust. And in a world where politicians are regularly accused of misleading the public, even minor embellishments can become symbols of a wider credibility problem. And the controversy has now snowballed further with revelations that Reeves has since updated her LinkedIn profile to more accurately reflect her employment history, a small act but a tacit admission that her previous descriptions may have stretched the truth. Moreover, reports have surfaced that Reeves was subject to an expenses probe during her time at HBOS, adding yet another layer of scrutiny to her career narrative. So the Madeley-Reeves exchange echoes past political missteps, and one is reminded of Gordon Brown's infamous claim that he had saved the world during the financial crisis, an overstatement that became a lasting gaffe. Or more pertinently, the case of Andrea Leadsom, who claimed her business career made her more qualified for leadership than Theresa May, only for closer inspection to reveal a rather less impressive CV. I remember back in the day, I was coached into standing against Andrea Leadsom, and I was offered a dossier which would have proven Andrea Leadsom's career embellishments, let's say, and some very odd goings on. I did read quite a lot of that file before I backed away from using it, and I was astonished. There are things going around Fleet Street, or what is now Fleet Street. What isn't geographically Fleet Street, of course. There are things which are going around, and every so often they're given the opportunity to surface. And this, I think, is one of them, because it's certainly not the BBC have suddenly been doing an in-depth examination of Rachel Reeves' CV. No. There are dossiers, like the dossier I was handed about Andrea Leadsom, that people have been given, and they think, should I use it, should I not use it? I chose not to use it because I thought that it was wrong. to use so much muck, and I thought that wasn't the way to win an election, and in the end, I ducked out of the whole thing. I blew the whistle and I talked about racism in UKIP, but I was interested. The other reason I suppose I was very reluctant was because I didn't like Andrea Leadsom. And that makes a big difference. I felt that it was a sort of personal issue, and that I didn't want to feel that my disliking of her was something that prompted me to use this filth. The filth exists. And whether it's true or not, I have no idea of knowing. But I think that once you get into opening that can of worms, you have to think very carefully about what your own position is, what you actually want out of it. And I think there are times when filth needs to be left alone. As for embellishing a CV, once the drip starts occurring, it's very difficult to put that filth back in the bottle, and that's the problem. I don't think I would have exposed it. I don't think I would have called it out. But once it's already out in the public domain, I think it's sort of open season, really. And Reeves looks duplicitous. In any other job, she would have been taken into the office and told that she'd brought the company into disrepute. She should consider her position. In Parliament and in government, we're told that the boss has complete confidence in her. I wouldn't. She lied in her CV. Or if she didn't lie in her CV, she's allowed lies to gather from the minions who've processed all that sort of nonsense. So she's not in control. And yet she tries to give the impression that she is in control. So it's either a lie or incompetence. I don't care which it is, really. I don't like the thought of somebody who is so inefficient, in charge of our money, in charge of our future, and doing so with impunity. Equally, I don't see that she can possibly apologize for this and keep her job. So either it has to be exposed as somebody else's problem, or it has to be identified as a media attack. It's not something that can be evaded for much longer. So the danger is twofold. First, this episode dents her reputation as a straight-talking, competent chancellor, and secondly, it gives her political opponents an easy attack line. The opposition will no doubt seize on this controversy to question whether her economic vision is as reliable as her CV, or Americans call it the resume. It's worth noting that Richard Madeley's questioning style often invites derision, but in this instance his persistence proved highly effective and he left the big questions until the end. Reeves may have expected a softball interview on growth policies and infrastructure, but instead found herself facing an interrogation reminiscent of an Andrew Neil special. Her failure to shut the controversy down with a straightforward acknowledgement or better prepared defence allowed the story to take on a life of its own, and it has. Ultimately, all she had to do was say, well, that's a LinkedIn profile, and I wasn't directly involved in it. And that's enough, isn't it? That's enough. Or LinkedIn profile, I wasn't really thinking about it as I filled it in. Not a serious CV, is it? It's not the stuff that I would have handed in to the Bank of England or the Halifax, Scotland thing, or even the government. It's a bit of fun on the internet. But she didn't do that. She evaded. And that evasion tells you a great deal. or not. Ultimately, will this matter in the long term? Perhaps not. Reeves is a heavyweight in the Starmer administration, and as long as economic performance improves, this moment may be forgotten. But it serves as a cautionary tale, much like the Andrea Leadsom stuff. In a digital age where every claim is fact-checked and every CV scrutinised, even the smallest discrepancies can take on outsized importance. And I'm sure there are dossiers running the breadth of Parliament about almost every single person who is there. Would you want to open them? I certainly don't want to open another dossier like that. I do not want to do it. And I won't do it. But believe me, those things are there. And there's dirt, there's so much dirt floating around Westminster. It's like a particularly efficacious diet of Laxido or something in the corridors of Westminster. And if you go sifting, you're bound to find the dirt. Does it help us to know all that dirt? I don't think it really does. And yet once it's out there, can you trust that person again? Whether it's true or whether it's false. Can you trust that person again? Reeves is a heavyweight in the Starmer administration, but as long as this is there, her heavyweight status is compromised. As long as economic performance improves, this may be forgotten. But if it doesn't improve, her evasion will be remembered. And for Rachel Reeves, the lesson has to be clear. When it comes to political careers, authenticity, like in reality TV, authenticity is probably more important even than accuracy. But evasion smacks of something to hide. And once you've got that scent in your nostrils, the dogs are out.